The average net worth of a white family in the US was about $171,000. And when you compare that to the average net worth of a black family of about $17,000, you see the stark difference. So the average net worth of a white family is almost 10 times as much as a black family. 10 times as much. This is the racial wealth gap that we hear so much about. So the racial wealth gap is that disparity between white wealth and black wealth. And why is that? Welcome back to another episode of the MD Investor, where this February 2024, Black History Month, we're doing our series on black wealth. So the main reason for this huge discrepancy has to do with home ownership. The main reason for this wealth disparity is home ownership. Your home is the largest investment that most people will ever have. The equity in your home. We know that the majority of black people live in the cities, and they live in the inner cities, in buildings, in apartment buildings, and they're majority renters. You may say, why is that? It has to do with redlining. Redlining is a term you might have heard, started in the 1930s. What redlining was entire neighborhoods where black people lived. The federal government said they would not back those loans for houses in these areas. Obviously, in those times, just like now, the race lived separately. White people lived here and black people lived here. The federal government said houses in this area where black people lived, they would circle it on a map with a red marker. We will not back these loans. Meaning, if the bank was to give a loan to a black person that lived in one of these areas, and then the black person was not able to pay the mortgage, the federal government said we will not cover that mortgage. So then those loans became more riskier, right? If we give a mortgage to this black person in this area, and for some reason they lose their job and can't pay their note, we're going to be out. We'll have to foreclose. And the federal government is not going to jump in and bail them out to support the loan. Whereas in these areas where white people live, the federal government said, yes, we'll back those mortgages. So those mortgages became less risky. So if a white person buy a home and can't pay it, the federal government will go in and they will pay off the mortgage. That is a less risky mortgage for the bank. So what are the consequences of this? Well, the consequence of this is that white people were able to get mortgages at very attractive rates. Their home values appreciated, and then they build wealth. Right? If you buy, we hear about it all the time. My grandfather bought a home in Long Island in 1945 for X amount of dollars, and now it's worth $2 million. That's equity. That's equity that can now be used to give inheritance to grandchildren. They can retire with that money, move to Florida. They can give money to their kids to pay for college. That equity in that house can do a lot of things. Whereas the black family who was not able to get homes, the black family who was not able to get a mortgage, maybe had to rent. And obviously, when you rent, you're throwing your money away, you're not getting that back. So that's equity that was never created, money for college that was never received, inheritance that was never given, and you see the comparison. And when you fast forward that, they're able to give money to their grandkids in an inheritance to get them started on their home, and we are not able to do the same. So the racial wealth gap, to a large degree, is tied to home ownership. There's other things as well because there's discrimination into higher education as well. So obviously, we couldn't go into certain schools, which means you weren't able to get the degree to get the high paying job, right? And even through struggling and when you could, you still were not able to buy the home in the best neighborhood you could, right? So I saw such a touching story on CBS News about a black couple they followed in the 1960s, and they wanted to get a home, and the real estate agent would tell them, "Oh, we have nothing in that price range." A white couple would go in right after, and they thought, "Sure, let's go out," and they were never able to find a house. They had to rent, and he had plenty of money, and he spent his money on fur coats and clothes, and they died broke. And then when you see whites who were able to get the houses, and you see the accumulation in equity and value, and the benefit that has been passed on generation. So the racial wealth gap is real. It's tied to a large degree on the effect of racism, but the majority of it is tied to home ownership. Obviously, I preach in this channel that your home is not an asset in terms of it doesn't put money in your pocket on a month-to-month basis, but your home, obviously, a place to live, and your home does increase in value over time, and it is part of your portfolio that can benefit your family. Again, this is the MD Investor, continuing our series on Black wealth, so we can increase our financial IQ and teach our children and break the cycle of generational poverty. MD Investor out. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube.